Welcome to the Extra Podcast. This is Jeff Bucknam speaking, and this is another in our series of Nobody podcasts. Not because the people we're talking to are nobodies, but in the world's eyes, they might not be well known, but we think that they're known well by Jesus. So Peter Prediger is sitting across from me today. Peter, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Peter's story is that he's been a part of Northview for a number of years, actually was an elder for a period of time, and is currently working as a missionary, local missionary, I think is the best way to say it, serving with refugee claimants in our particular area, which I want to get to in a minute. Before that, though, Peter, I want to know, are you from this area? You're married, first of all.
Yes, my wife Donna and I are actually the leadership of Inasmuch Community Society. Yeah, we met when we were 15 and 16 years old. And
how long did it take for you to realize you wanted to marry her?
It was pretty quick.
You didn't get married, though, right away?
No, I had to wait till I graduated university.
Okay.
That was the rule at Royal Military College. You had to wait till graduation.
Okay.
And I'm not sure Don Lynn was even sure at that time, but I think she's pretty good with it now.
You've grown on her.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good. You grew up in where's your hometown?
I grew up in Southern Ontario in Burlington. Not a Christian home. In fact, not a whole lot of fun to be in the house. So I couldn't wait to leave and get to university. And then Donlin and I actually met before we went off to university. And
is she from that area as well?
She is. But she was about 25 miles away. And those days we talked miles.
Yeah.
And so I used to cycle out to her place in the morning and the summer times and then cycle home in the afternoon or in the evening. So, yeah, I fell in love with, as soon as I saw her, she was wearing gray elephant pants, and that was it for me.
That was it?
Yeah, that was it for me.
That's what did it.
Yeah.
So all you who are listening, all you ladies, the gray elephant pants apparently are a good move on some guys.
Back in the 60s, they sure were.
Gray elephant.
Yeah.
That's great. So she, you met her early, but it took a number of years. You just mentioned that you went to Royal Military College.
Yes.
I'm an American, so I don't know. I have no idea what that means.
It's sort of like West Point,
except
better quality, and it's a degree-granting university. So I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. Yeah. So
what did you want to? That's what you wanted to do, mechanical engineering, or did you want to work in the forces, the armed forces?
Well, it was required after graduation to spend 5 years in the armed forces to pay back for the education. So I did that. Was an officer in the combat engineers here in Chilliwack.
Okay, is that how you got out to this part of the world?
Yep, and I knew right at the end of that time, I was away so much all over the world with the military that I wanted to get out and spend more time with Donlin and the kids, but then really didn't realize that I didn't know that she was not too happy with me at that time, being an A-type person and being an officer in a combat unit in the armed forces. So, yeah, our marriage, we had 2 kids, awesome kids, Pete and Allison. We had the 2 kids, and I didn't realize how things were not great in our marriage. And we actually had moved to Mission when I left the military. And there was a fellow who was installing the telephone system in the house we had built in Mission. And he said to Don Lynn, hey, there's a daycare that's run at the Mennonite church here in Mission. So Don Lynn went to that. Long story short, there was a woman there who invited Don Lynn to a Bible study, which Don Lynn thought, well, why not? I'll give it a shot. And she ended up becoming a Christian at 31 years old. And when she came home, she never told me that she'd become a Christian. But what I saw in her, even though I fought like crazy, what I saw in her, she became a 1 Peter 3 woman, and I really wanted what she had. And so after 2 years of back and forth, the woman who had led Donlin to the Lord, her husband led me to the Lord, and that really turned our lives around at that point in time.
So were you involved in the church in that period of time, the 2 years between, or were you kind of just fringy?
No. Yeah, no, I was not even fringy. I was really not all that crazy about that whole Christian thing.
Why not?
The same old reason, how can a good God let all of these children around the world starve and be in war and that sort of thing? But it was actually her husband, this woman's husband, who led Donlin to the Lord. We were driving to the Vancouver Aquarium one day and with the kids. He looks over at me as we're driving and says, "Hey, Pete, what's your relationship with Jesus Christ like?" And I looked at him and said, "What kind of stupid question is that?" But it was about 6 months later that we were sitting on their dock up in the shoe swap, and man, it was like he'd pushed me off the dock into fresh water. And I went in Chase the next day and bought a Bible and read it from cover to cover. And we became very involved. It was at Mission Alliance Church, helped them build a church, and yeah, we loved it.
Still in Mission?
We were living in Mission at that time, and then I was working as an engineer and engineering manager for Fiberglass Canada. There used to be a big plant there in Mission, and it closed down, and I was offered a promotion back in Ontario with the same company, so we moved. It was 1990. We moved back east. Ended up in Sarnia, Ontario. There was no Alliance Church there, so we didn't think there were any Christians in town. So we're trying to figure out what to do, and someone said, "Hey, try this Baptist church." So we went to the Baptist church and absolutely loved it. It was Fellowship of Evangelical Baptists, Temple Baptist in Sarnia.
That's great.
Yeah.
But how many years you ended up going on the mission field?
Yeah, it was really neat what happened when we started at Temple Baptist in Sarnia, Ontario. We were at church one Sunday, and they had an announcement that there was going to be a men's breakfast. So I thought, what the heck?
And you were a man.
I was a man.
You eat breakfast.
And I can do breakfast. And our son, Pete, was 13 at the time. And so we went to the breakfast, and there was a missionary from Haiti who was, talking about putting a team together there. It was really awesome. And I'm sitting there looking at him, and God said to me, "You and Pete are going to Haiti as part of this team." So right afterwards, I went up to George and I said, "Pete and I are going to go on the team." And so he looked at me and says, "Okay, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a mechanical engineer." He says, "No, we need real people, someone who can build a building and that sort of thing." And I said, "Well, George, I believe that Pete and I are to go." So a few months later, that was in March, the team was going in November, he called me and said, "Hey, we've got room for one." I said, "Well, it doesn't matter because Pete's coming with me." He said, "Well, we can't take a kid." So, but anyway, September rolled around, we both went. And yeah, I didn't do anything down there. The field director was having a heck of a time with leadership with his team. So I spent 3 weeks with him just talking about leadership and meeting with the staff and working through the barriers and problems that were there. So yeah, I didn't really go down and wield a hammer or anything. So it was, yeah, he was right. I couldn't have done anything that they were doing. So,
right.
But God had other plans.
And this kind of human resources type of work is what you ended up doing for a number of years.
Yeah, and that's what in the end took us to Africa. The same church, the next year there was a missions conference, and there was a mission. They had workshops. And our son Pete, after being in Haiti, he said, "Dad, Mom and Dad, we got to go do something worthwhile." So we went to this missions conference, and there were workshops. And one of them was called "How Do You Become a Missionary?" So Pete and Allison are sitting with us, and Pete tapped me on the shoulder. "You and Mom go to that one." So we went to that one. And as this guy was talking about all the steps, as he's worked with many missionaries over the years, it was like, man, God's been looking, and he's been looking in our window. So after the workshop was done, everybody got up and left. And Donlene and I are crazy glued to our seats. Both of us felt this. And so we asked this old fella, "Okay, what are the needs?" He was with Transworld Radio, International Christian Broadcasting. And he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a mechanical engineer." So he said, "Come on back tomorrow night." So we went back the next night. This old fellow's running towards us with a piece of paper in the air, yelling at us, "It's on Bonaire, it's on Bonaire." I said, "Awesome, what's a Bonaire?" And he said, "Scuba diving capital of the world." And so I said, I can suffer for Jesus in the scuba diving capital of the world, because I had been a combat diver in the military. So we applied, we went through the whole acceptance process, and as we raised our support in about 10 months. And as we're getting closer...
That's short.
Yeah, getting closer. We had a very good group of people who we became engaged with in Sarnia. So about 2 months, we were all packed up. Pete and I are looking at scuba gear and all that sort of stuff. And got a phone call from Transworld Radio, said, we have your field assignment. I said, wait a minute, it has to do with scuba gear, right? And they said, no, we'd like you to go to the field director for Africa. So when I regained consciousness, I went home and told Donlin and Pete and Allison, and there was a lot of excitement in the house. The other thing that happened, though, during that time is a fellow that I'd worked with at Fiberglass Canada, he had been promoted and joined another big company. And he'd been calling me for a long time saying, I'd like you to join this company that I'm working with. And so he called again. And so I said, well, what the heck? I'll come and meet with you. And the job was to be in the Kingston area. And I always wanted to go back to Kingston, have a sailboat, all that really cool stuff. Mm-hmm. And they were offering more money than I could imagine, a car, everything. So I told him about Africa, and he said, well, that's cool, but this is really awesome. So I'm driving back to Sarnia. It's about a 3-hour drive from Toronto. And all the way, I'm so excited. And I get home, and the house we had was right on the beach on Lake Huron, and it's July, and so Don and the kids weren't there. So I went lay on the beach, and I'm looking at all these boats going by, thinking, I can have one of those. I can have one of those. Mm-hmm. And so, Don Lynn, she's pretty straightforward. When she got to the beach, I'm saying, this is what's happened. And I said, this must be what God has for us. And she gave me one of those looks like, whatever. That night, we're in bed, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm tossing and turning. I'm so excited about this boat I'm going to buy. And Don Lynn turns on the light, pulls out the Bible, and pulls out the parable of the sower that talks about the good seed that falls and life's worries, riches, and pleasures, and it doesn't bear any fruit. Looks at me, slams the Bible shut, and turns out the light. Well, that was the end of that job opportunity. So, yeah.
Why didn't he tell a story about boats?
I know.
That would have been way.
Anyway, so yeah, we ended up in Africa for 5 years. Our kids went off to boarding school. And went into a situation there that was very difficult. There were a lot of staff issues. We were stationed in Swaziland, but I was responsible for sub-Saharan Africa. So dealing with a lot of missionary and structural issues. So,
was that a big change for you when you arrived? I'm assuming you arrived there. Had you traveled to that part of the world, or seen that kind of poverty, or seen that kind of situation before?
No. Well, we'd been to Haiti. We'd seen the situation there. But I remember going to downtown Toronto because at those times, because of apartheid in South Africa, you had to get a visa even to stop on our way through to Swaziland. So I'm looking around this downtown part of Toronto, and all these big black guys are playing basketball. I'm going, oh my goodness, what have I got myself into? But people say to us, did you like Africa? Well, how do you, we were surrounded by poverty, but we absolutely love the people. We made a lot of very good friends within the Swazi culture and in my travels throughout Southern Africa. And it was tough taking two teenage kids, 13 and 16 years old.
Was it the hardest part, you think?
For Donlin especially, she worked a couple of times outside the home, but she's an awesome mom. I don't think a child could ask for a better mom than Donlin. She loved her kids, and then to put them on a bus to boarding school was very difficult. And so it was like her purpose in life had ended at that point. And the difficulty for her too is I was constantly traveling. So I was away probably 2 weeks of every month. So it was difficult for her. Plus the changes that I was bringing about in restructuring some of the other staff there, and with I basically saw our role, Donlin's and my role, was to enable the African to do the ministry, whereas the way the mission had been run in most missions as I traveled in Africa was the missionaries went over there to tell the people what to do, tell them about Jesus, tell them what to do, and they were the leaders. But I really believed that the missionary's role is to empower nationals to reach their own. And so, That worked out very well, that part of it. We went from 27 missionary families down to 11 in 4 years, and tripled the Swazi staff, and most of them were in leadership.
That's great.
And it was just a lot of mentoring. Yeah.
It's great. And you came back. It was a set period of time that you were supposed to be there.
Well, I knew that at the end of, when we'd reached the 5-year point, we really wanted to be back in Canada so Alice could have her last year of high school in Canada. Pete had already graduated high school there and had been in Canada for a couple of years and went to Trinity Western. And so we were in Canada for a year, for Allison's last year. And then we were asked to go to North Carolina, to the headquarters. And as Vice President, International Human Resources, I hated the title. And I said, can I just change it to Director of People Development? And so for the next 5 years, again, this was very hard on Don Lynn. For the next 5 years, I was seldom home. I was in Asia. Asia restructured the Asia-Pacific region and then restructured the what they call the Americas region, Latin America and South America. So, and then at the end of that, I knew it was time to move on. Like, I've seen too many missionaries, or not too many, but many missionaries who remain in the field because they don't know what to do when they get back home. So I really felt it was time for us to move on. I'd done what I believed that.
So you moved back to this area?
Yeah, we moved back to Abbotsford.
What year was this?
2003.
Okay.
So we've been back 14 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you start attending Northview at that point?
Yeah, well, we sort of went around we went back to Mission Alliance Church, and everybody, was different. So we tried out Northview and loved it and have remained here since that time. And, I've become engaged and involved in various things. But I think the real focus of where we've come since we returned is Don Lynn. Her heart is as big as her body and has this passion for people of other cultures. In Swaziland, the people there loved her to death. She would come into my office at lunchtime and say, hey, do you want to walk down to the bank with me? And it's a third world country. But I said, it takes too long, because she stopped and talked to her. The women would stop and talk to her. Yeah. And, there you just don't say hi or hi, how are you? It's, how are your kids? How are your cattle? How's everything? So the people there loved Don Lynn.
And you guys, it's been a few years. You've kind of been thrust into the situation that you're in now with Inasmuch Ministries. You Inasmuch sort of started how? What is it first?
Well, what the impetus was, while we were in Swaziland, every second Sunday, there were 2 refugee camps in the country. One held 45,000, the other 25,000 refugees. So there was a Mozambican pastor who had started a church, a little Baptist church in one of the camps, and asked Don Lynn and I to go. So we fell in love with the people. And then when the genocide happened in Rwanda, I won't spend the time on this, but God put on Don Lynn's heart that she was to meet a woman there that day, when we went to the camp for the first time. And it was a Rwandan woman who had 4 children and a husband, and Don Lynn knew, this is our family. So we became very close to them. They had very little English at that time. When we returned to Canada, we started the process of sponsoring them to come to Canada. And it took 2 years. We worked through Christian Reformed Church in Sarnia at that time, who had the licensing agreement. And so this family arrived in Canada. We had already been transferred to North Carolina, but that was the start of it, the heart for this family. And it was God speaking to Don Lynn in that situation. So when we came back, we're trying to figure out, okay, what next? Yes, I started working again in engineering and management, running a small company. And one day we had a phone, or Don Lynn started working at Community Services just as a helper in English language training. And people from our small group, that sort of thing, knew we had a heart for other cultures. So one day, it was Sunday, it'd be 7 years ago, this past Easter, had a phone call from the Abbotsford Police. Marv Fefchek, who's a detective sergeant, goes here to Northview, had heard of us. And he said 3 o'clock in the morning, Abbotsford Police were called by the U.S. Border Services and said someone's jumped the border. So they were picked up by Abbotsford Police, processed at Sumas border crossing, and they're about to be released. And Marv said, hey, Don Lynn, they're just putting them out in the street. They have no clothes other than the wet ones they were wearing. And Don Lynn said, heck, bring him here. So we already had 13 to 16 people coming for Easter dinner. And so a couple more was no big deal. So the police van shows up at our place, and this precious young couple with a little 15-month-old guy get out. And they lived with us for almost 2 months. And we knew nothing about this refugee claim process. So anyway, we helped them through this. And then Don Lynn, during that time, was given this vision of a big house for refugee claimants. Neither of us knew what that meant. But so what we did very shortly after that was we sold our house, which was Downs Road Estates, and so we could be ready for whatever God had. And I'm sort of standing off to one side, and Donald saying, no, we got to do this. We got it. I'm okay. So we ended up living in Dave and Bev Kajawa basement suite.
There's a couple here from the church.
Yeah, we love them to death. They are so precious to us. So 4 years we
And the
waited.
reason you did these, so we're clear, you moved out of your house.
Yep.
How old are you?
I'm 66 now.
Okay.
So
we're
we're
about 60 years old.
60 years old.
You moved out of your house.
Yep.
And moved into a basement suite.
Yep.
Just to be ready for what the Lord might have for you.
So we thought, okay, how do we move?
That's phenomenal. I'm saying it's very different.
Well, I guess because we'd moved so many times.
Yeah.
We just thought, Don Lynn was so believed that this was God's plan for us. And at this point in my life, whatever God is talking to her about, I'm going, all right, let's do it. So we moved into their basement suite, and we heard about Kinbrace, which is an organization that works with refugee claimants out of Grandview Baptist Church in Vancouver. So we went in, Don Lynn went in and visited them. And that was it. She was hooked. So we decided, hey, let's create our own society. We called it Inasmuch, after Matthew 25. Inasmuch as you've done for the least of these, you've done for me. And so we registered with the BC government. We got about 5 or 6 people around us who understood and sort of followed along with what we were doing. We formed a board. And some money started trickling in. We had $6,000. So we're sitting there with the board saying, okay, there's no big house right now, but let's do something. So Don Lynn again.
Because there's increasing number. This is, I think people need to hear. This is prior to the Syrian refugee crisis. Yeah. And so they were coming, but very much under the radar. It wasn't like the big thing that's on everyone's.
Exactly. And we don't work with Syrian refugees.
Right.
These are refugee claimants. So Syrian refugees, when they come, they already have permanent residency and all that sort of stuff. So these are people with no status. And so what we did, we talked to the board and said, hey, let's just do this. We're going to rent an apartment. So we rented an apartment here in Abbotsford, met with MCC. They furnished it for us. And the next day we got a phone call from Inland Refugee, they're the ones who try and find housing for the refugee claimants. And this young man he had arrived from Iran with no identification. He had become a Christian in Iran and was fleeing for his life, basically. Paid human smugglers to get him out of the country. So when he arrived in Vancouver, he was in detention for 5 weeks. And when they let him out, he had no shoelaces. It was pouring down rain on the February, and they gave him a taxi jet, took him to Maple Ridge. A homeless person said, go to the Salvation Army. Salvation Army called Inland. Inland called us. So the next day we had this young man arrive, and he spent the first couple of nights with us and then started him in an apartment. So we started the process with him. And then a month later, we're saying, hey, we still got a little bit of money left. Donald says, let's rent another apartment. So we rented another apartment. Another Iranian Kuwaiti came. And we're starting to really love what we're doing because these people bless our socks off. They're running in fear for their lives. So we thought, okay, let's try one more. So we rented another apartment, and it was a young fellow from Cameroon. And so we had 3 apartments going, and we're actually running around every Sunday morning bringing these guys to Northview with us. And language was a problem. Maybe when he came, in fact, the Sunday after he came, he was baptized in center court. Yeah, it was by Ezra.
Yeah.
So we just, after that, God just gave us an incredible love for these guys.
Yeah. You've been blessed though since those days. You don't currently run apartments. You actually have a house.
Yeah. So 2.5 years ago, Don Lynn knew we were supposed to get a big house, and someone told her that it was Ross Siemens, who comes here to Northview. He's a counselor,
city counselor,
owns Hub Motors downtown. He said, the city rents houses. So Don Lynn phoned the city, came and looked at this big house we're in now, and it was, you wouldn't want to keep your dog in there. It was a teardown. So Don Lynn said to the city, I got to talk to my husband. We're going to take it. And I'm going, oh, gee. This was the big house she'd always been dreaming. So we got our board together, and one of they came through the house with 4 building contractors, and they said, bones are good. So we thought, okay, where do we go from here? So we phoned Vic Schellenberg.
He's pastor here, Pastor Care.
So we met with Vic, and I'm trying to remember who else it was. Sorry. Anyway, Vic said, hey, tell you what, we'll give you 4 minutes at every service on Sunday morning. So Donna and I just said, this is our vision. This is the big house. We need help. We were overwhelmed. 75 volunteers came forward. Flooring companies, painting companies, contractors, plumbers, new furnace, air conditioning. House was totally redone in 1 month.
It's beautiful too, by the way.
Yeah.
I've been there. It's quite a place.
So we very quickly ended the contracts because it was costing us a fortune. We're looking at $800 a month plus cell phone plus internet for each place. So probably $3,000 a month we were paying. And money was sort of trickling in. Mm-hmm. So we opened up the house and filled it. We had very quickly after that, our first couple came. They're from Afghanistan, and the most precious people you ever want to meet. And then Iraqi Kurdish couple, and it's being
and they're in the house that you live there.
We live there. We live, I listened to your message the other Sunday, and you were talking about how young people nowadays want to live communally. Well, we are living very communally.
Yeah, you are.
We live it's a 5-level split, 4,000 square feet. And Donlin and I live in the top level of the house. We have 3 rooms up there. And then you move down, and it's all common area from there. And we are so amazed at the way people get along. And it's just, we started working with the other 2 housing organizations. One is also out of Willingdon, 2 Christian organizations. We said, should we be putting rules in place for this? And they said, no, just set the atmosphere. Just have Christ set the atmosphere in the house. We have no rules. We post nothing. And most recently we had a young couple from Iran and Kurdish, and another couple, they're 65 years old from Kurdistan. And then a mother and her 12-year-old daughter from Palestine came. So we're looking at, okay, you look at what's happening in the Middle East, and we thought, what are we getting ourselves into?
This could be a...
So about four days after the mom and daughter came, Donna and I went out, met some friends in Vancouver. And all the way into Vancouver and back, we're thinking, what are we going to find when we get home? Got home about 10 o'clock at night, walked in the door. We heard laughter, the smell of popcorn, and there was baking going on. There's something that God is doing in that place that is setting a beautiful atmosphere where people there's trust, there's love that happens there.
So these people, they stay with you for about 8 months?
Yeah, 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
And during that time, we have...
you walk them through the process of trying to get them refugee claimants.
Exactly. So I attend the hearings with them. We try and find volunteer drivers to take them in because sometimes they have to report weekly and monthly to Canadian Border Services to make sure they haven't run. Before they come to us, they're cleared. as far as security by CBSA. And 6 to 8 months. And we also have a woman who comes into the house 4 mornings a week. She has a PhD in sociolinguistics. So she teaches English to their level of education. And most who come to us have university degrees and are very well educated. Language is the problem. We talk a lot about Canadian culture and how important it is to, some of them start volunteering with MCC just to get Canadian experience. We also round everybody up and take them to Remembrance Day ceremonies. Canada Day, the whole family came back. We had over 30 people on.
Because that's the number of people who've gone through your house.
We've had 28 through the house. In the last 2.5 years since we were there. And it's awesome. I get a phone call occasionally from various people and they say, "Hey, Dad," call Donlin, "Hey, Mom, how are you doing?" Whenever there's a celebration of a birthday or someone is granted refugee protection, deemed a convention refugee, everybody who's around comes back and we celebrate with Canada stuff.
Yeah.
So, everyone who's come through the house has been granted refugee protection. So we work with work permits. When they leave the house, our goal, and we've been successful so far, is that they have work, a place to live, and that place is furnished.
Yeah, you guys help them out with the first stuff that they put in their house.
So they have a good foundation for beginning their lives.
And some succeed more than others in here, I'm assuming?
I don't know. We've had a very good success rate at this. A year and a half ago, we had a young fellow from Afghanistan, 17 years old. We took him on. So he's under 18. No one knew what to do with him. We phoned Child Services or whatever it's called, and they said, "We don't know." So we said, "Well, what the heck, we'll take him." So we walked him through his last year of high school. He just completed his first year engineering at UBC.
Wow.
Everybody's...
And they're all Christians.
Oh, no. No.
But that's a significant part of what you're doing. We can describe your work in a way that makes it sound like it's focused entirely on getting them status in Canada. But that is, in many ways, for you, a means to an end. Well,
it is. And our heart in this is that they would come to know Christ, and they would see Christ in Donlin and I, and in the volunteers that come into the house.
It's not a condition for your service, but it's a goal in the end.
But some of the discussions we get going, Jeff, are just phenomenal. During, Ramadan was last month in June, and I'm sitting downstairs with 2 of the men, both of them actually Kurdish. One does not really want to have anything to do with Islam anymore. The other one it's more of a traditional thing, and they're talking about all the rules of Islam. And I said, it's really cool. As a Christian, Jesus gave us 2 commandments, rules, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul. I probably got the order wrong. And the other is to love your neighbor as yourself. And I said, you guys are my neighbor. And at Easter time, we had 12 on the Sunday and another 18 on the Easter Monday for dinners. To be able to sit around, they're all saying, "Oh, happy Easter" to us. And I said, but Easter's not about chocolate bunnies and all that sort of stuff. And so we talk about Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and you're very open about your faith in because you're living with the people, your devotions, and all sorts of things that you're actively involved living your life before them as faithful followers of Christ.
Yeah, so it's amazing how open they are. It's like all of the pressures of their faith is not there anymore, and a lot of it is tradition. Yeah, they're Muslim, and what a beautiful opportunity. Every couple of days I put new scripture. We have a whiteboard down in the kitchen area, and I put new scripture and the discussions that get going on that. That's great. So
are you so years ahead from now, this is all you want to do? Just these few rooms, this is all you have vision for?
Well, yes, no. the biggest thing for us right now is trying to find people. I'll be very honest. Our Christian community, people look at us like we're crazy and don't really understand. We will be walking around Mill Lake or at Costco, and people come up and saying, "I know you guys. You work with those refugees that jumped the border." I said, "Yeah," and they said, "Aren't you afraid?" I don't know. I really thought about that part, but so there's a leap here that somehow our comfortable Christian culture, and it sounds like I'm judging, has to be able to jump across, because for us to even find people to work with us, and we've got a number of volunteers who have made that step. They've crossed that line. But our desire is, yes, we would love to see more. The 3 housing organizations, ourselves and the other 2 in Vancouver, we're only covering less than 25% of those who are in need. The other of housing, who are refugee claimants. The rest are living at night in low barrier shelters in Vancouver, Belkin House, and that sort of thing. So it's a very fearful situation.
Yeah. So you'd like to see the ability to do more.
Yep.
For them, and there's some possibilities perhaps in the days ahead. At least that's what you're praying for.
That's what we're really praying for. And the biggest thing for us is one, finding others who we can create the connection with, that will walk across that comfort zone, because it's tough. It sounds like it's all a fairy tale with these folks, but we're riding the waves.
Let's say they're people, and people in crisis.
They miss their families.
Yeah.
There's turmoil. There's horrible things going on in their countries, and they don't know whether their families are safe a lot of the time. Then there's the fear of whether they're going to be returned to that country if their refugee claim is denied. So,
and you have a window here to show the love of Christ.
Exactly. So one of the things, yes, it's people, but it's also
money. I was going to say, you need money.
We need money. We need finances.
Yeah. Have you found that difficult to do?
Yeah.
You're not a fundraiser.
I'm not. That's...
I know you, and I don't get the feeling like
no.
Your heart, you get up in the morning and think, boy, I'm looking forward to asking people for money today.
No, I'd rather have projectile vomiting, I think, than do that. So, yeah, the hardest part for us is we love being embedded, I guess you could say, with these folks on a day-to-day basis, and the response we're getting back from those who've left. But yeah, the fundraising part is not us. It's just not us. And so, on September 30th, we've got the Ride for Refuge. If anybody who's a cyclist would like to join our...
I'm a cyclist.
I
know.
You didn't
invite me?
Well, I'm here. I've got
got a card.
I've got the invitation to invite you. But we got Adam Wormold, who's on our board, and Jeff Belcham, who goes to Living Waters in Fort Langley. They've joined the team.
Good.
We've had a group from Trinity. Oh, these young people, Jeff, have blown us away. They're TRC, Trinity Refugee Awareness Committee.
I mean, at Trinity,
they're putting together a team for us.
Track.
Yeah.
Track.
If
somebody's interested, you have a website.
Yes, we do. It's very simple. Inasmuch.ca.
INAS.
Much. Yeah.
.ca. You can find out all sorts of things. Your contact info is there.
Everything's there.
And any way that you might want to be getting in touch with Donlin Peter. Your house is in the middle of our town.
Yep.
And people probably drive by it all the time and have no idea. It's affixed to Mill Lake. It's a little area there. And it's you just... One of the things that I appreciate about your work is whenever I drive by, I pray for you.
Thank you.
I ride my bike by, pray for you. But that this work is happening right in little old Abbotsford. You're seeing remarkable people from nations anyway, being reached with the gospel, and it's quite a great thing to hear. Peter, I'm so thankful that you've come to chat with us today. God bless you.
Thank you.
In days ahead, I'm sure that Donlin, who's not here today because she's back east with some family
issues,
God bless her in the work she's doing as well. And it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right.